Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to learn about glomerular diseases. So in the first part we'll learn exactly the pathogenesis of glomerular diseases, whereas in the second part we will learn glomerular diseases with the help of some examples. So in this first part we'll learn about pathogenesis, clinical presentation, laboratory features, and in short the difference between nephrotic and nephritic syndrome. The disease of kidney can be better understood with its parts. As you know, nephron is the functional unit of kidney, which consists of glomerulus. So inflammation of glomerulus is glomerulonephritis, which could be primary, secondary, or it could be chronic glomerulonephritis. The tubules and interstitium of the nephron can show different diseases like acute tubular necrosis, and there could be acute or chronic pyelonephritis. The third component is vessels. The blood vessels in the kidney can show nephrosclerosis, which could be benign or malignant, and there could be obstructive causes because of, say, stones leading to hydronephrosis. There are some specific cystic diseases of kidney. So what are the major clinical presentations with which kidney diseases present to us? First is nephritic syndrome. It is caused due to inflammation of glomerulus and associated with hematuria, that is presence of red blood cells in the urine, mild to moderate proteinuria, and hypertension. This is the classic presentation of an example acute streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Nephrotic syndrome is another presentation in which you will get heavy proteinuria, more than 3.5 grams per day. There is hypoalbuminemia, there is severe edema, hyperlipidemia, and lipiduria. There is presence of lipid in the urine. Some patients can present with asymptomatic proteinuria or hematuria. They don't have any other symptoms or signs apart from presence of protein in urine or presence of blood in urine. Some patient can present with acute renal failure. It is dominated by oliguria or anuria, that is reduced or no urine flow, and recent onset of azotemia, that is increase in the blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine. Chronic renal failure, as the name suggests, it is a prolonged condition. There are signs and symptoms of uremia, and it is result of all the chronic renal parenchymal diseases. That is, many of the kidney diseases finally can turn into chronic renal failure. Renal tubular defects. These are dominated by polyuria, that is excessive urine formation, because there is defect in renal tubules, and renal tubules are involved in absorption of excessive filtered water. There could be nocturia and electrolyte disorders because electrolyte absorption is done by the tubules. So whenever there is a damage to the tubules, there are these kind of findings which you can see. There's polyuria, nocturia, and electrolyte disorders. Urinary tract infection. It is characterized by bacteriuria or pyuria, that is presence of bacteria in urine, or pus cell or leukocyte in the urine. So as the name suggests, it is an infection, and it can affect any part of urinary system starting from kidney to bladder, so that is pyelonephritis, or it could be cystitis. Renal colic or nephrolithiasis. The name nephrolithiasis says that there are stones in kidney. Lithiasis is stone, nephrosis kidney. And whenever there is an acute obstruction, patient will present with colicky type of abdominal pain and can lead to obstructive uropathy, that is hydronephrosis, hydroureter, and there will be secondary changes in the kidney parenchyma. There could be mass lesions which you can encounter in kidney in the form of cysts or tumors. Now, in the renal dysfunction, there are certain terminologies which you should understand. First is exotemia. Okay, the word exotemia means it is just a biochemical abnormality with raised blood urea nitrogen and creatinine. So this exotemia is caused when there is decreased GFR. Okay, glomerular filtration rate is decreased. So any pre-renal cause of reduced GFR, that is hypoperfusion. When patient has hypotension, there is a hypoperfusion of kidney parenchyma, which leads to decrease in GFR and causing azotemia. Renal causes, like whenever there is an inflammation in the kidney, you can definitely get decrease in GFR, like in glomerulonephritis. And post-renal, that is when there is an obstruction to the outflow of urine, you can get decreased GFR leading to azotemia. Now there's one more term which you should understand is uremia. What is uremia? It is azotemia with clinical features. Okay, when patient has biochemical abnormality along with its clinical signs and symptoms, we call it as uremia. What are features of uremia? You will see fluid and electrolyte imbalance. It will lead to dehydration, edema, hyperkalemia, metabolic acidosis. There is abnormality in calcium phosphate metabolism leading to hyperphosphatemia, hypocalcemia, secondary hyperparathyroidism because of that, and renal osteodystrophy. Hematological abnormalities seen are anemia and bleeding disorder. Cardiopulmonary abnormalities seen with the uremia are hypertension, congestive cardiac failure, pulmonary edema, and uremic pericarditis. Gastrointestinal features of uremia include nausea and vomiting, bleeding, esophagitis, gastritis, and colitis. Neuromuscular abnormalities like myopathy, peripheral neuropathy, and uremic encephalopathy can be seen. Dermatological abnormalities like sallow colored skin or pruritus or dermatitis can also be seen in case of uremia. So to understand the glomerular pathology better, you should learn or you should try to understand the basic histology and electron microscopic features of the glomerulus. So this is the structure of glomerulus. As you know, there are afferent and efferent arterioles which form a capillary loop in the glomerulus and is surrounded by Bowman's capsule. Okay, so here in the center you can see cross section of the glomerulus, in which you can see there are these capillary loops are cut into the cross section. These capillaries are lined by endothelial cells. These endothelial cells are specialized ones which have fenestrations on its surface. So through these fenestrations, the fluid and components in the blood which is flowing through these capillaries can pass through. Okay, so first is the fenestration in the endothelium. Then comes the glomerular basement membrane. Okay, so this glomerular basement membrane is collagenous basement membrane. Okay, which is the second thing a fluid or substance pass through. Then comes the visceral epithelium. This visceral epithelium is also called as podocyte because they have a foot-like processes. Okay, so you can see here there are foot-like processes, and in between these foot-like processes there are filtration slits. So finally, this is the third thing which a fluid or substance pass through, that is through the filtration slits. Okay, so apart from this visceral epithelium is the parietal epithelium, which is the outermost layer, and the space between visceral epithelium, that is podocyte, and the parietal epithelium is the Bowman space. There is a mesengium consisting of mesangial cells and mesangial matrix just present in between these capillary networks, which gives support to the capillary network, and also it has a role in pathogenesis of various types of glomerular diseases. So here is the pictorial presentation of the same. You can see this is the capillary lumen in the center, the yellow colored, and there are fenestrations to the endothelial cells. The green colored basement membrane is the second layer, and finally is the podocyte or visceral epithelium, which has a food processes. In between is the filtration slit through which the substances or fluids are passed. You can see mesengium, blue colored mesengium consisting of mesangial matrix and mesangial cells. On electron microscopy, uh, apart from this glomerular basement membrane, there is about 15% of glomerular filtration occurring through the mesengium. Okay, the glomerular basement membrane is normally having anionic charge. So this charge act as a barrier to filter the anionic molecules present in the blood. For example, albumin. Albumin is a tiny molecule as compared to other plasma proteins. So it can easily pass through the fenestrations present on the endothelial cells. But the glomerular basement membrane, it has a negative charge, that is anionic charge, just like the albumin, because of which albumin is repelled back into the endothelial through the endothelial cells into the blood vessel, and they are not filtered through the glomerular basement membrane. Okay, so here you can see electron microscopic picture of the filtration membrane. It consists of the podocyte. In between these food processes are filtration slit, the basement membrane, and the capillary endothelial cells having the fenestrations. So this basement membrane is consisting of three zones: lamina rara interna, lamina rara externa, that is the outer and innermost layers, and lamina densa, which is an electron dense central part of the basement membrane. So this basement membrane has a negative charge. Also these food processes have negative charge, which repel the negatively charged molecule albumin back into the vessel lumen, and albumin is normally not passed through this basement membrane or through the food processes. So here is pictorial presentation of the same. So remember that filtering membrane consists of endothelial cells, the glomerular basement membrane, and the visceral epithelium or podocyte. Now the glomerular diseases as such are classified into three main categories: primary, secondary, and hereditary. Okay, the primary glomerular diseases are the ones in which the glomerulus is the primary site of affection. Secondary glomerular diseases are ones in which the patient has some systemic disorder and glomeruli are getting affected secondarily. Hereditary glomerular diseases are the ones in which there are some genetic alterations, or there are some inborn metabolic defects because of which kidneys or glomerulus gets affected. So this is the classification. This is very important. You all must remember the classification properly, because this is very commonly asked in the exam. It can also can be asked as a short note for 2 marks. So please remember this classification thoroughly. So glomerular diseases, primary examples are diffuse proliferative glomerulonephritis, which could be post-streptococcal or non-streptococcal; Cricentric or rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis; membranous, minimal change, focal segmental glomerular sclerosis; membrane proliferative glomerulonephritis; IgA nephropathy; chronic glomerulonephritis. Secondary, as I said, these are because of some systemic diseases like SLE, diabetes mellitus, amyloidosis, Goodpasture syndrome, or vasculitis. These can secondarily affect the glomerulus, and hereditary syndromes like Alport or Fabry's disease or nail patella syndrome can affect the glomeruli. Then what are the clinical manifestations of glomerular diseases? We have seen some of these previously. Nephrotic syndrome, as I said, it is characterized by heavy proteinuria, more than 3.5 grams per day, because of which there is hypoproteinemia, or hypoalbuminemia. There is hyperlipidemia, because hypoalbuminemia will lead to activation of liver to produce more and more albumin. Alongside, there is also production of uh, this lipoproteins. So there is hyperlipidemia and lipiduria, and patient has edema. Generally starts around the eyelids and later can present with anasarca, that is generalized edema. There could be asymptomatic proteinuria or asymptomatic hematuria. Then comes a nephritic syndrome. Remember, the difference between nephrotic and nephritic is there is hematuria in nephritic syndrome, glomerular nephritis. The proteinuria is not as heavy as nephrotic syndrome, it is less than 3.5 gram per deciliter. Patient has hypertension and there is renal failure. So now you might think, why there is such change of symptoms, or there is such change uh, in the uh, uh, in the features in glomerular nephritis or nephritic syndrome and nephrotic syndrome. So what happens in glomerular nephritis is there is an inflammation of glomerulus, as the name suggests, glomerular nephritis. Because of this inflammation, there is a damage to the endothelial cells, to the basement membrane, and to the food processes, that is the visceral epithelial cells. So the filtration of larger molecules happen, okay, which is not happening with the nephrotic syndrome. It is just a passing of tiny albumin in case of nephrotic syndrome, but in glomerular nephritis it passes the larger molecules, that is albumin, globulin, fibrinogen. Alongside, you can also see red blood cells. So that is why you will see hematuria and proteinuria. But when there is an inflammation of glomerulus, there is swelling of those endothelial cells, and there is decrease in glomerular filtration rate. Okay, normally what happens, you have learnt in general pathology that whenever there is an inflammation, there is increase in the blood flow to that particular site. But here in kidney, something different happens. There is a damage to the endothelial cells, so there is swelling of endothelial cells. You will see fibrin deposition at the damaged endothelial cells. Okay, so because of that, the lumen reduces in size and there is decrease in glomerular filtration rate. So that is the reason why you won't get excessive proteinuria in case of nephritic syndrome, which happens with nephrotic syndrome. Okay, so renin-angiotensin system activates and person gets hypertension in case of nephritic syndrome, and eventually there is a renal failure. Acute glomerular nephritis is the short-term renal failure. Concentric glomerular nephritis, it is a kind of rapidly progressive renal failure where on morphology you will see crescent formation in the glomerulus. Chronic glomerular nephritis, in which there is a chronic progression of renal failure, and you will see a lot of sclerosis of the glomerulus. And finally is the end stage renal disease, which is an irreversible kind of renal injury, and eventually a lot of kidney diseases ends up into end stage renal failure. So this whatever features like nephrotic syndrome or glomerular or nephritic syndrome, it is like a spectrum of diseases. Okay, so these are just the clinical presentations. This is not a disease specific as such. This is just a clinical presentation or morphological presentation. But if you go back to the morphology, or more specifically to the etiology, you will see there are multiple diseases which can have a common clinical presentation. Okay, so there is a spectrum in which you can see pure nephrotic syndrome or pure nephritic syndrome, or there could be a combination more or less of these. So minimal change glomerulopathy is the classic example of nephrotic syndrome, whereas concentric glomerular nephritis is a classic example of nephritic syndrome. Something like FSGS, that is focus segmental, can show you features of nephrotic syndrome with little bit of component of nephritic syndrome. So please try to understand that the diseases enlisted here can have different different presentations, okay, and the etiology for these diseases uh, could be different or multiple. So what are the major clinical presentations? It could be acute nephritic syndrome, as we have discussed. There could be gross hematuria, mild to moderate proteinuria, hypertension, azotemia, and edema. I'm telling you this repeatedly because this is very important, and these are very commonly asked in the exam. Nephrotic syndrome, as I said, heavy and selective proteinuria, that is only albumin is passed more than 3.5 gram per day. There is hypoalbuminemia, edema, hyperlipidemia, and lipiduria, and there could be asymptomatic hematuria, proteinuria. What are the laboratory features which we are going to see in this kind of patient? In urine examination, you will see the volume of urine is decreased. The specific gravity will vary depending on the etiology or the kind of disease involving the kidney. For example, if it is glomerular nephritis, obviously specific gravity will increase because there is lot of protein. But when it is a tubular disease, the specific gravity is decreased because lot of fluids are just passed through the tubules without absorption. Color, if it is hematuria, you will see smoky kind of urine. Proteinuria will depend on the etiology. Heavy proteinuria with selective proteinuria is seen with the nephrotic syndrome. Yes, then you can also see for 24 hours albumin, which is a criteria in nephrotic syndrome, hematuria, lipiduria. Then microscopically you will see presence of RBCs, pus cells, casts, and bacteria. What are casts? Casts are the cylindrical structures which are formed because of the constituents in the urine. Okay, for example, when RBCs are passed through the tubules, at some places they will form a clog, and when they are removed from those tubules with the passing urine, you can see on microscopy of the urine that the RBCs have taken the shape of the lumen of tubule, and these are called as casts. Then you can also do blood urea, serum creatinine in this patient, which will be increased. Beta 2 microglobulin in blood and urine can be done. Lipid profile will show that there is increase in all the components of lipid, that is HDL, LDL, LDL or triglyceride, but HDL is lowered. So instead of calling it as hyperlipidemia, we call it as dyslipidemia. There will be anemia and hypercoagulability of blood, and on peripheral blood smear examination you will see Bohr cells. ASO titer will be increased and serum complement levels will be decreased because these complements are used and deposited in the kidney. In the glomerular diseases, there are some histologic alterations. Okay, these are certain terms which you should understand because these are going to be used frequently hereafter. First is hypercellularity of the glomerulus. So this hypercellularity of the glomerulus is due to proliferation of either mesangial or endothelial cells, proliferation of epithelial cell, that is crescent formation, especially the parietal epithelial cells will show you crescent formation. And when there is an inflammation, obviously there will be leukocyte infiltration leading to hypercellularity of the glomerulus. There could be basement membrane thickening. This basement membrane thickening could be because of deposition of basement membrane material, like in diabetes mellitus, due to deposition of immune complexes on endothelial or epithelial side of the basement membrane. You know that the endothelial cell and epithelial cells are present on either side of basement membrane. So below these cells, there could be deposition of immune complexes, or it could be deposited in the basement membrane itself. Due to deposition of materials like fibrin, amyloid, cryoglobulins, or abnormal fibrillary proteins, you can see that the basement membrane is thickened. Then comes hyalinization and sclerosis. Hyalinization is the deposition of homogeneous eosinophilic extracellular material made of plasma proteins. When this obliterates the vascular lumina, the glomerulus is become sclerosed. Now comes the pathogenesis of glomerular diseases. Okay, so various studies have shown that the immune mechanism plays an important role in pathogenesis of primary and most of the secondary glomerulonephritis. So this immune mechanism could be antibody mediated, in which there could be in situ immune complex deposition, which could be fixed intrinsic tissue antigen or planted antigen. There could be circulatory immune complexes, which could be endogenous like DNA or tumor antigens, or exogenous like microbial products, which are deposited later in the glomerulus. There could be cytotoxic antibodies which damage the glomerulus. Apart from antibody mediated, you can also get cell mediated, but it is less common. Activation of alternate complement pathway can also play a role in pathogenesis of glomerular diseases. So now we will learn these pathogenesis in detail. So discussing the pathogenesis in detail further, the antibody mediated glomerulonephritis could be in situ in immune complex nephritis, in which the intrinsic antigen could be fixed or it could be planted. This planted antigen could be either endogenous, that is DNA or immune complexes, or could be exogenous, that is the microbial product. In situ immune complexes, the examples are given. First is anti-glomerular basement membrane, that is Masugi nephritis. This is an experimental kind of nephritis. It was demonstrated in laboratory in rats by injecting anti-rat kidney antibodies prepared in rabbit. Okay, so these antibodies are prepared in rabbit and these are injected to the rat kidney tissue. So initially there was heterogeneous injury to the glomerular basement membrane, and subsequently there is autologous phase. Okay, there is injury to other basement membrane apart from just the kidney. Other basement membranes like the alveolar basement membrane of the lung is also damaged. So this kind of nephritis or this kind of clinical picture is seen in human in Goodpasture syndrome, in which you will see there are antibodies for non-collagenous domain of alpha-3 chain of collagen type 4, and these antibodies will damage the glomerular basement membrane, also the alveolar basement membrane. On immunofluorescence, you will see linear basement membrane deposits. There is a severe glomerular damage, and in the later part you can also see crescentic type of glomerular nephritis. Another example of in situ immune complex nephritis is Hayman's nephritis. Okay, in this Hayman's nephritis, the rat was immunized with antigen containing proximal tubular brush border. So this antigen is megalin. These antibodies are produced to this megalin or Hayman, and these cross-react with the antigen located on the basal surface of visceral epithelium, causing damage to this visceral epithelium, resulting in membranous glomerular nephritis. Okay, so immunofluorescence will show you granular kind of deposits of immunoglobulins and complements along the subepithelial aspect of glomerular basement membrane. And in human, you can see autoantibodies triggered by drugs or bacterial endotoxins or graft versus host reaction, showing similar kind of pathogenesis. So here you can see pictorial presentation in which the antigen is in glomerular basement membrane, and antibodies these attack, and the immune complex, that is antigen antibody immune complexes, these are deposited in the subepithelial surface of glomerular basement membrane. These are the granular deposits which you can see here and leading to membranous glomerulopathy. In antibody mediated kind of glomerulonephritis, you can see planted antigens like DNA or any other nuclear proteins. They have an affinity for glomerular basement membrane, so they get planted over the glomerular basement membrane. Apart from that, the microbial products from bacteria, virus or parasites, even the drugs, then aggregated proteins like immunoglobulins, which can be deposited in the mesenchyme, which on immunofluorescence will show you granular kind of pattern similar to that of the previous circulating immune complexes. The circulating immune complex nephritis, you have learned this kind of example in general pathology of hypersensitivity. This is type 3 kind of hypersensitivity. So here the antigen is not of glomerular origin. It could be intrinsic like seen in SLE, which is a DNA fragment, or it could be extrinsic, that is the bacterial product or hepatitis B antigen, surface antigen, HCV, Treponema pallidum, then malaria parasite fragments, antigen, then tumor antigens. So these antigen antibody complexes which are formed in the blood are trapped in the glomeruli. Okay, so here the antigen antibody reaction occurs outside the glomerulus, but they are trapped in the glomeruli, and these trapped antigen antibody complexes with the help of complements, leukocytes, and probably with the renal cell cause the injury to the glomerulus. So you will see subendothelial and subepithelial deposition of the deposition, and sometimes even mesangial deposition. So if there is a degradation of these antigen antibody complexes by inflammatory cells or mesangial cells or endogenous proteins, it will be short-lived, and there will be recovery of the patient. For example, in post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, a lot of more than 90% of the patients they recover. Okay, because these antigen antibody complexes they stay there for very short time. When this occurs repeatedly, there is repeated exposure to antigen antibody complexes, it can lead to chronic glomerulonephritis. For example, in SLE, there will be membranous or membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, which further can stay for a long time, leading to chronic glomerulonephritis. So here you can see the pictorial presentation of different kind of deposits which we can encounter in kidney biopsies. So in the left side you can see the normal glomerulus. You can see mesenchyme, endothelial cell, epithelial cell, and in between is the basement membrane. So on the right side picture you can see large subepithelial deposits. These are called as hub. Okay, these are subepithelial. So these are present just below the epithelial cell, visceral epithelial cells. For example, in acute post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, small subepithelial cells, these are called as lumpy bumpy deposits. In membranous glomerulonephritis, which you can see here labeled as B, subendothelial deposits, which are labeled here as C, you can see that they are present in between the glomerular basement membrane and endothelial cells. For example, in SLE. Okay, as we have discussed here, discussed before, in SLE the antigen is endogenous. These are DNA fragments, and these are deposited here in the subendothelial region. Intramembranous deposits labeled as D here can be seen in SLE and membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, and mesangial deposits can also be seen commonly with IgA nephropathy and sometimes with SLE. So what are the factors which determine the site of deposition and what kind of deposition seen with particular type of glomerulonephritis? It is the molecular charge. We have seen that the glomerular basement membrane and food processes, they have a negative charge. So highly cationic molecules, they can cross the glomerular basement membrane and they can deposit it in the subepithelial location, right? So the positive charged ions can be attracted towards the negatively charged basement membrane and food processes, and they're deposited in subepithelial location. So whatever immune complexes they have positive charge can be deposited over there. Highly anionic or negatively charged molecules may be trapped in subendothelial location because they cannot pass the glomerular basement membrane or the food processes, or may not be trapped at all, that is non-nephritogenemic. Neutral charged are trapped in the mesenchyme. Now, apart from charge, the size of immune complexes. Large immune complexes can be removed by macrophages, whereas small immune complexes can be seen deposited. Then, apart from the molecular charge and size, the glomerular hemodynamics. Okay, how is the glomerular filtration and how is the condition of the endothelial cells? How is the mesangial function? How is the integrity of charge selective barrier in the glomerulus? All these factors will be involved in deposition and nature of deposition, site of deposition of circulating immune complexes. So here is an immunofluorescence picture. This is how immunofluorescence microscopy will show you the granular deposits in membranous glomerular nephritis. You can see on the left hand side there is granular kind of deposit in the glomerulus, or on the right hand side you can see lumpy deposits in membranoproliferative glomerular nephritis. So this is how this immunofluorescence microscopy will show you the presence of deposits. Apart from these immune complexes, you can have cytotoxic antibodies acting against the glomerular cells, that is against mesangial cells causing mesangial lysis followed by mesangial proliferation, against endothelial cells causing thrombosis, against epithelial cells causing proteinuria. Cell-mediated immunity can play a role in glomerulonephritis, but not in, but it is very uncommon. So the sensitized T cells and activated macrophages can have a role in cell-mediated immunity. Activation of alternative complement pathway, like in dense deposit disease, that is membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis type 2, you can see decreased serum C3 because these complement C3 is deposited in the kidney. So you will see that the serum complement 3 levels are decreased, the C1 and C4 are normal. Decreased serum level of factor B and properdin. Glomeruli will show you deposits of C3 complement and properdin, but no immunoglobulins, which can be demonstrated with the help of immunofluorescence microscope. So what are the mediators of glomerular injury? Cells like neutrophils, monocyte or macrophages, T lymphocyte, NK cells. These cells can cause activation of complements, or complements can activate some of these cells. Platelets, glomerular cells, particularly the mesangial cells, have an important role in the glomerular injury. Soluble mediators like complement components, cytokines, chemokines, and coagulation factor also play an important role in glomerular injury. So that was all about the basic pathogenesis of glomerular injury. In second part of this lecture, we will learn the glomerular nephritis even better with the help of some examples.